Hi, I'm Amy at EuroLuxHome.com. Welcome back to our historical overview of the styles of European antique furniture. If you enjoy history and antiques, think about liking this video, subscribing to our YouTube channel, and maybe even sharing it with a friend who might also enjoy learning about European antiques. So today we're talking about the Victorian style, which is associated with Queen Victoria I of England, who was on the throne from 1837 to 1901, almost the entire 19th century. And behind me is this gorgeous Victorian era hunting settee that dates right about 1880, 1890. But in order for you to understand the Victorian style, let's turn back a little bit in history and talk about what happened before Victoria took the throne. So we had the Georgian period, and the Georgian period ran from 1714 to 1830, almost the entire 18th century. And it was the succession of four Georges: George the First, George the Second, George the Third, and George the Fourth. And the style associated with this Georgian era is very stately and elegant. It's what we consider to be traditional furniture today. Beautiful mahogany veneers, of just very classic and elegant. We have the famous British designers Chippendale, Hepplewhite, and Sheraton, and I encourage you to go watch our Georgian style video so you could learn more about the hallmarks associated with the Georgian style. But after George IV passed, his brother William IV took the throne briefly, and when he passed, then Victoria came to the throne. Now, Victoria I was the granddaughter of George III. And interestingly enough, George III is the third longest reigning monarch in England. And Victoria, his granddaughter, is the second longest reigning monarch in England. And that leads us to the great-great-granddaughter of Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, who is the longest reigning monarch. She reigned for over 70 years. So I find that very interesting, what a family with such longevity. So Victoria I takes the throne of England when she is just 18 years old. And 3 years later, she marries her first cousin, Prince Albert Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, from Germany. And it was an arranged marriage, but it was a very happy marriage. They were very much in love. And it is interesting to note that Queen Victoria actually popularized the practice of a white wedding dress. Before her, it was really you just wore your best dress, but she chose a white wedding dress in order to show off the beautiful British lace that was on her gown, and she profoundly impacted wedding design from that point on. But after she and Prince Albert were married, and as I said, they were very happy and prolific. They had 9 children, and it is said that she is known as the grandmother of Europe because her children then married into all of the prominent royal families, and her offspring ruled on the throne in, of course, the UK, as well as Russia, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Spain, Greece, Yugoslavia, and Romania. And some of them are still on the throne today. So it very interesting family dynamic. Now, Albert did die relatively early, and Victoria was just devastated by his death. And she went into mourning wearing all black and continued that habit for the rest of her life. But while Albert was still alive, one of the really important things that Victoria did while she was on the throne was create peace with France. France had long been a quote-unquote enemy of England. They had fought over many hundreds of years. But Victoria reached out to France in order to create peace. So let's turn now and look at what's going on in France. When Victoria comes to the throne, we have the figure of Louis Philippe on the throne in France. And I do encourage you to go watch our video about the Louis Philippe style, because that is a style that is all about simple, clean lines, very minimal decoration, really just using the wood grain itself to be its own natural decoration for the pieces. And so we've talked about this idea of a pendulum swing, that when the pendulum goes all the way to one side, so the Louis Philippe style, very plain, very basic, then you can expect that the pendulum is going to swing to the other side. In essence, the Louis Philippe style is the anti-Victorian style. It's about as far away from Victorian as you can get. So what happened? Why did the style change? Well, Louis Philippe fell out of favor with the French people and he was forced to abdicate. And the French people decided that they would like to have a second Republic of France, and they would prefer to have a president rather than a monarch. So they elected Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. That name might sound familiar to you because he was actually the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, who had declared himself emperor just a little under 50 years previously. And you may not be surprised that history often repeats itself, and within 3 years, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte declares himself Emperor of France and becomes Napoleon III. So I mentioned this piece behind me was a Victorian era piece because it's actually a Napoleon III piece, because Napoleon III was on the throne at this time in France. Napoleon III and Victoria are contemporaries. But we call it Victorian era because Victoria is the one that really is most closely associated with the style. So Napoleon III declares himself emperor, and he's married to a woman named Eugenie, Empress Eugenie of Spain, and she had a very ornate, heavily decorative style. And so he and Eugenie look back and they say, okay, just like Napoleon used art and architecture and decorative arts as marketing to promote himself as the emperor, this Roman emperor of France, Napoleon III does the same thing. So he and Eugenie look back and they just fall in love with Rococo, Louis XV, Louis XVI Empire style. And so they bring about what's called the Rococo revival, the neoclassical revival, and the Empire revival. So all of those styles are now made again here in the 19th century. Now, I mentioned that Victoria reached out to Napoleon III to create a peace treaty. And so she and Albert went over to France and actually visited Napoleon III at Versailles. And she fell in love with this gorgeous Rococo revival furniture because Victoria herself had very ornate and sumptuous taste. And so she just loved this very heavily decorated, gilded, ornate furniture and brought these ideas back to England. And so the Rococo revival style sweeps England and France, and it also comes over to the United States. We have the wife of a president, Mary Todd Lincoln, who purchased a very famous bed that is in the White House today. It's called the Lincoln bed, and it is actually a Rococo revival piece that was made from a New York manufacturer in the Rococo revival style. So just interesting to see how popular that Rococo revival style was here during the 19th century. So we're in the Victorian era when both Victoria and Napoleon III are on the throne, but the style is known as the Victorian style. And the 19th century was a tremendous time of complete technological and cultural transformation. Just like our own culture completely was revolutionized by the internet and e-commerce, at this time, the Industrial Revolution was a complete transformation of culture and society. So it had started at the end of the 18th century, but now by 1840, the Industrial Revolution has completely taken a foothold in Europe. And it is flattening society and causing the rise of a middle class who now has more money to spend. And these people are really interested in decorating their homes with furniture and decorative arts that are things that they could never afford before. And so they are falling in love with this very ornate and sumptuous furniture that looks very rich and elegant. And so with this increase in demand for furniture and home goods, we see an increase in production, also enabled because of steam power and new tooling and processes, which is making furniture production more affordable, and it is also more accessible as we have the expansion of the railway system across Europe. So you have this rising middle class that has more money to spend. They're able to buy furniture more easily and more affordable. Now, if you remember in previous videos, we've mentioned furniture production used to always be on a bespoke basis, where just one piece was custom made for a patron. Now you have manufacturers who are beginning to actually start furniture stores where you can go in and find an entire suite of furniture. So for instance, a dining room suite, the table and the chairs and the matching sideboard and the matching china cabinet, or in a bedroom, a bed with matching nightstands and a matching dresser. It seems odd to us today that that was novel, but it was. It was a brand new way of purchasing furniture and home goods. So it made furniture very accessible, and it caused people to be interested in lots of different styles of furniture. So besides the Industrial Revolution really causing a total transformation of European culture, we also have in England, the British Empire has just about reached its peak in expansion. So the British Empire at this time under Victoria was actually 25% of the world's population. Incredible to think. And if you added it all up, it made the fifth largest landmass in the world. So you have an unprecedented exchange of ideas and art and culture coming in from around the world. It was said that the sun never set on the British Empire because as it went all the way around the world, it was crossing over some part of the British Empire. So this had a tremendous impact on society, but I will mention that Victoria and Albert were responsible for outlawing slavery in the British Empire. They were the first to do so, and it is very notable that the British government led that charge in abolishing slavery in the British Empire. Now, also in 1851, because of this influx of ideas and technology and decorative arts coming in from around the world, Prince Albert actually led the initiative to hold a great exhibition. And the Crystal Palace was built, which is an amazing building, all made of glass and steel. It was quite a wonder when it was built at this time. And it was built in order to hold the Great Exhibition, which was the first World's Fair. So the entire population of the British Empire were invited to come and exhibit at this great exhibition. And so all of the latest technology and all of the decorative arts were shown there, and people came, and it was highly influential. Also, under Victoria and Albert, the Education Act was passed, and that made schools publicly funded for the first time. So you also have a much greater emphasis and interest in history and art. And so all of these ideas come together to create the perfect storm so that people are interested in lots of styles. This is what makes up the Victorian style. It basically basically is eclecticism. Today we know it as maximalism. So let's talk a little bit more about what this Victorian style is. I'll pop up pictures of interior design of in the Victorian style. But as you're looking at it, I think you can understand the Victorian style is everything all at once. If you love it, you love it. If you hate it, you really hate it. It is very elaborate with very rich ornamentation, sumptuous materials like velvet and silk, and extremely colorful. The Victorians just loved patterned wallpaper, very colorful and patterned rugs. It was a very luxurious style. Every square inch is filled. On the walls, you'll see framed art everywhere, decorative accessories all over the house, every nook and cranny filled. It's said that nature abhors a vacuum, and that is true in the Victorian style. So very luxurious, very romantic and exotic. And so you begin to mix and match all of the styles. The Gothic style of architecture became very popular at this time. We actually have the Houses of Parliament were built at this time in the Gothic style. And so, but not only that, people wanted Gothic style in their homes, but also Renaissance style with all of those classical elements and mythological references. Of course, I've already mentioned the Rococo style swept into England with all of the swirls and flourishes. We have neoclassicism, and with, again, the classical references and the ribbons, fluttering ribbons, and the swags of laurel leaves. We have the Empire style, and in England, it was called the Regency style. And we still have Georgian furniture and Queen Anne furniture being made and put in together. Sometimes people would have a whole dining room in one style. So say, for instance, a Renaissance dining room and a Rococo revival bedroom. Or sometimes they would just mix and match all of the pieces together. That was really what was the trend in Victorian England, was mixing and matching and putting it all together. You also even have Asian and African influences coming in with great big collections of things. The more, the better. And Victorians loved kitties and puppies and bows and swags and everything. More is more is more. That's the Victorian style. Today we know it as maximalism, and it's very trendy again today. It's creating your own unique style with color and your own personal collections, just making your home your very own. So now we'll go and we'll take a look at some of the pieces here in my gallery to just show you these Napoleon III or Victorian era pieces. So EuroLuxHome.com specializes in Victorian era furniture. As I mentioned, all of our pieces are actually Napoleon III pieces as they come from France and Belgium. But while Victoria was on the throne at the same time as Napoleon III, they're considered Victorian era. So again, the Victorian style was mixing and matching all of the historical styles, looking back through history and bringing it all together with lots of patterned wallpaper and colored rugs and framed art. So here we have a hunting style buffet or a Renaissance revival. Another Renaissance revival piece, lots of carved details, but then you might mix it together with a Renaissance style piece with all of those neoclassical details. Here is a Louis XV or a Rococo revival piece, lots of swirls and swoops and still some classical elements mixed in. Another Rococo revival piece. And again, imagine mixing these all into your home. Finally, a Louis XVI or an Empire style piece. So the Victorians just loved mixing it all together, putting it all together, and creating their own unique style. If you love Victorian style, and or perhaps you even have a Victorian style home, we would love to work with you here at EuroLux Home. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the Victorian style. If I can answer any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. But remember to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and maybe even share it with a friend who would also enjoy learning about European antiques. See you next time.